Hello, this is Nice Wander, and you are watching the NOWMAN show. And joining us here in the studio is Los Angeles Unified School District teacher, who's also an author, musician, and a radio DJ, Barry Smolin. Welcome to the NOWMAN show.
It's a pleasure to be here, Dan.
Excellent. Now, there's various monikers. There's Big Daddy Schmo, there's Schmo, and I'm sure your students call you Mr. Smolin.
Or Mr. Schmo.
Oh, Mr. Schmo. Yeah. And your kids probably call you Dad.
Dad.
So how would you like me to address you?
I'm just Barry.
Just Barry? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do that. Now, you grew up in Los Angeles, correct?
Right.
And you went to Fairfax High School on Melrose, right?
Yes, I did.
What was that like?
It felt like the center of the Milky Way. That's often how I describe it. It was just in the mid-1970s, Fairfax High was filled with creative spirits, and the synergy of all of that gave rise to a lot of great art and music and people that went on and did creative things with their life.
Wow, such as yourself.
Yeah, well.
So did you return there to actually teach?
Yeah, my first teaching job, it was like a welcome back Cotter story.
Seriously?
Because he went back and taught at his old high school in the context of the old TV show. Yeah, when I signed my contract with the LA Unified School District, I was assigned to Fairfax High, where I had gone as a teenager, and it was a great experience because a lot of the teachers that I had and who heavily influenced my life were still teaching there. So that was a great experience to go from being their student to being their colleague. I taught there for 5 years, and after those 5 years it was definitely time to move on because it was kind of like a womb for me. All of the teachers, they took good care of me, and they took a little bit too good care of me. So I needed to kind of climb out of that. They still treated me like a 10th grader.
Oh,
and I
really?
wanted to find my own voice as a teacher.
Wow.
So I moved on to Hamilton High School.
Wow, cool. And when did you realize that you wanted to actually teach? Was there a defining moment?
I kind of always had inklings that I would do that work. I didn't know it would be in the high school English class setting, but I always kind of felt like a teacher, no matter what I was doing. I had that was my tendency in life, was to absorb information and pass it along, which is what teachers mostly do.
Exactly.
When you strip it down. And when I was in high school, when I was at Fairfax, I had two incredible English teachers. In 10th grade, a guy named George Schoenman, who really opened up the world of close reading of literature and also taught me how to write.
Cool.
Deeply inspired me and opened up my mind tremendously. He spoke to my deeper conscience. And then in 11th grade and 12th grade, I had an English teacher named Richard Battaglia, who blew the roof off of my mind and took me into the infinite, both literarily, philosophically, spiritually, psychically, and in every way. He really made me who I am today. And it really was sitting in those two classrooms, Schoenman and Battaglia, where I started to think, what they're doing for me, I would like to do for young people one day. I thought that would be a great thing to dedicate my life to. And I didn't go into it right away, but because I was doing music and I was writing and still had wild oats to sow.
Yes.
But I came back around in my mid-20s and committed myself to the profession. And I'm in it for life.
So there's that old expression, noble profession. Would you consider teaching a noble profession?
I don't know how noble it is. It has to be driven from something inside of you.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's noble or not, but most great teachers are driven from some deep impulse to communicate, the continuum of learning that really defines our species.
That's true, and there's something about the school environment that draws people back. I always saw that. Even on the university level, there were some people that just couldn't leave.
Yeah, most people who commit themselves to teaching for life, chances are they liked school when they were students.
Exactly. Yeah. And you, though, unlike a lot of teachers, you were recognized. The LA Times, even Time Magazine, and some other publications.
Yeah, very early in my career.
This is based on your methods and also your student success, correct? With those methods, right?
Yeah, I'm unconventional in the classroom. I'm pretty wide open and uncensored. And I teach via digression and anecdote is the way that I describe my pedagogy, where I will introduce a topic and I will illustrate it using a humorous story, sometimes from my own life, sometimes from current events, and that will lead to other stories and to other stories, and it's an unpredictable path once I get rolling in the classroom.
So it's like bright minds making connections.
That's what's going on.
Yeah. And
I think that's probably always been how human beings have learned best, is having the free play, what I call the free play of ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And your teaching techniques were actually featured in a documentary called Flying Lessons with Mr. Smolin.
Yes, they were.
Let's watch a clip.
A lot of kids call me Schmo, which is my nickname. Some call me Mr. Schmo, Big Daddy Schmo. Some call me Pimp Daddy Schmo. I'm Barry Smolin. I'm a teacher. Jumps up. Your game is over. You shot your last.
He's an experience.
Yeah, you can't really describe him like as a person.
I can honestly say that I wouldn't have become a teacher if it wasn't for Mr. Smolin.
Man, he brings it like no one else does.
Head over heels, he tumbled. Yeah, I'm okay.
If you think about it, it's amazing how many of his students have become teachers.
He just made me believe what I was writing was worth reading. If you don't have that kind of teacher, it's harder to feel like it's important.
The Smolin effect.
It matters because we don't have many people to talk to.
I think people underestimate the impact one teacher can have.
We're just getting all of this for free, and it's like the best deal ever.
So it's right in the middle of page 430. You see where it says, but now? I describe my teaching technique as anecdote and digression, or digression and anecdote. I'm never sure which order to put that in. Look how Homer draws that out. It's very slow, back, and the same tension that's in the string of this bow. I've always wanted to be a mime. Actually, I hate mimes. I do. Pulling his rags out. Check this out, because Odysseus has the biggest scar in all of Ithaca. Do you know how to string a bow, by the way? Good digressions are an example of a bright mind making connections.
That's a good question.
Did it work?
No.
You got it right, man. Like, here's this crazy story, about when he was riding his bicycle and hit a parked car to impress a girl. Eventually, it comes back to what we were reading. Oh, it was all for a reason. What a beautiful profession it is, how noble it is to want to walk into a classroom and engage with students so that they start to see, okay, here's these symbols on a page that I have always thought was dead, that was boring. And there's this whole world in there. There's this life. It has this connection to your heart, to your brain, your soul, to the world, to culture. I like them to see that literature is exciting. We don't study it because it's old. We study it because these stories are about you and not where you come from. This is what you're going through right now. When you wake up in the morning, there really is no difference between you and young Telemachus in the Odyssey. He's having those same problems growing up as you are having right now. Those words on that page are the gateway to a glorious, ecstatic adventure. One of the joys of being a teacher is watching the kids make that journey. The best of all is when they say, I became a teacher because of you. There's no greater thrill than that as a teacher.
Nice.
Thank you.
You've done a good job.
I try.
You didn't catch my bad grammar there.
I'm not a grammar policeman.
Yeah.
If you had written it, I would have corrected it. But when people are speaking, I'm not one of those horrible English teachers who correct English in the spoken moment.
I'm the same way, as that, I write a lot, and when somebody makes an error on paper, I'm all about like, oh, no. But talking is part of dialect.
Yeah, and the big difference is when you're talking to somebody, if they don't understand what you're saying, you can ask them what they meant by that.
Exactly.
When one is writing, you don't know who's going to be reading it or when. You're not there to make yourself clear. So if your writing doesn't have clarity, then it's not going to communicate. And it really doesn't matter when you're talking.
That's right. You're absolutely right, especially now with video.
Sure.
See, words on a page are a gateway to a glorious, ecstatic adventure. Is that the kind of thing that inspired you to teach English? Is that kind of content?
Yeah, I fell in love with reading when I was a kid. It started with Dr. Seuss. The joy in that language, the dance, the play of the language completely captivated me, and I was hooked. But it was really later, when I was about 8 or 9 years old, when I started reading full-length novels. And
wow.
these symbols on a page would become complete worlds in my mind, and I was able to translate what was written into these pictures.
What kind of novels did you read?
The first book I ever loved in that way that really transported me was Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson.
Cool.
Once I read that, I just wanted to keep doing that again and again, to be taken on that journey. You know, Emily Dickinson has a poem that opens, "There is no frigate like a book to take us worlds away." And so reading became the vehicle for space travel for me.
Wow.
And in very quick succession, I read Treasure Island and then both Alice books, you know, Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. And then The Phantom Tollbooth by Norton Juster, which was just a playground of language and ideas for a kid. And Roald Dahl, of course, James and the Giant Peach and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Excellent.
So those books set me on a path that is unassuaged to this day.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of writing, you're also a published writer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a poetry book. You also have a book of prose. The poetry book is called Always Be Madly in Love, right? And the prose book is an actual experimental project where you were writing on Twitter one line at a time.
Yes, that was my first
One
novella.
sentence at a time?
I wrote a novella called Wake Up in the Dream House. That was the first book I wrote. And it did indeed grow out of a series of Twitter posts that I had thought were random, but a student of mine emailed me. She was following my Twitter, and she emailed me and asked, is this a story?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I hadn't thought of it as such, but let me go back and look. And I saw the thread, I saw what she was seeing.
Wow.
And I said, I'm going to see if I can write this whole thing. So over the course of 3 months, 140 characters at a time, I constructed this strange story.
Excellent.
Yeah, which then that led to the second novella, which was Narcissus in the Dark.
And you have that book with you now.
Yeah.
And now Narcissus is a novella whose narrator is God.
Yes.
He's sentenced to eternity in a dungeon where he thinks new universes into being.
Yes.
Now, heaven is a vixen, right? And God is imprisoned for dropping his drawers in Culver City.
Well, yeah.
What is that all about?
He's thinking to himself, okay, God is invisible, nobody can see me, so why do I have to wear clothes? And he's wearing a Lakers three-peat jersey from, you know, the early part of the 2000s. And he just takes it off, he takes off his pants, and he's forthwith arrested for public indecency. But then when he goes on trial, it turns out not to be for the indecency. He's put before this strange religious tribunal of 9 judges who are trying him for believing in his own divinity, for believing that he's God. And what I've tried to do in the novella is, I hope it communicates that this guy, he thinks that he's God. Of course, he isn't really God. But he insists that he is. And when he won't back down from that, they sentence him to eternity in a dungeon.
Wow, could you read a little bit of that for us?
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
be awesome.
Happy to. We can take a look at passage in the book where he is talking about coming into existence as God, and he says the most successful parasites create the illusion of symbiosis. My entire childhood was an elaborate game of hide and seek. And for a while, people thought they could see me. I abided as best I could by the consensus norms of primate social interaction until the age of about 17 in human years, when the delicate veneer began to crack and my divine nature began to shine forth. They called me crazy. They thought I heard voices in my head. I'm not crazy, I'd retort to my classmates. I'm the ultimate version of you. And when they'd answer, what does that mean? I'd say, that means I'm God, dig? That means I hear the voices in other people's heads. After that, they'd normally leave me be. Nobody wants to be friends with God anyway. God is always himself alone. God doesn't need a mirror. God is invisible. God already knows what he doesn't look like. Eventually, though, rather than flaunt my omniscience and omnipotence, I decided to live the life of an ordinary mortal on planet Earth. I became a gardener. I thought it proper to be a humble steward of my own creation. For a long stretch of human years, I tended the lawns and tombstones at a Jewish cemetery in Culver City. I made sure the dead had company. I brought them flowers and when relatives didn't. I listened to their secrets and remembered them. And I never used a leaf blower. Rake only, dude. Strictly old school. Eventually, I gave up gardening in order to wander Los Angeles in search of something that more closely fit my idea of reality, and thus do I abide on earth to this very unremarkable day. They let me sleep at the cemetery, even though I stopped working there eons of ages ago. They hardly know I'm there. I sleep whenever my head lets me, mostly during daylight hours. On those rare occasions that I do sleep, I try to wake up in time to watch the sunset. Every sunset is a lesson in impermanence.
Wow, that's fantastic.
It's from real early in the book.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. Well, let's take a break now. And speaking of creating a different universe or a new kind of universe, we'll be back with our guest Barry Smolin about his work as a musician and a radio show host. But first, this little break.
Hi, I'm Antonio Soyant from Angel Light Pictures, www.angellightgroup.com. And whenever I'm in LA, I always check out the NOWMAN show.
This is Nice Wonder, and we're back with Barry Smolen. You've composed music for the Showtime television series Weeds, and you've released 4 albums.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when did you first start playing and writing?
I started playing piano when I was about 5 years old. Actually, I started on accordion.
Oh, you did?
I started on accordion, and I hated it. But my parents had a piano, and I started just plunking around on that, and that was, I realized that was my native instrument. That was the language I was meant to speak.
Yeah.
My accordion teacher was also a piano teacher, so I told him, I said, I don't really enjoy the accordion. I'd like to learn piano. He thought that was great. And so I took lessons for several years and then gave that up and just started playing in bands, as a teenager. That's how it came about. And of course, listening to lots and lots of music, especially inspired by people like Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen.
Oh, yeah.
And then a little bit later, Randy Newman and Tom Waits. And,
did you play upright pianos or did you get electronics?
I had a regular spinet acoustic piano in my parents' living room.
Like the one that's in the Cantor's Kibitz room.
There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so almost exactly.
Yeah.
Didn't sound quite as good as that because it was always going out of tune. But.
And so the music that you play was rock or folk?
It was mostly rock.
Yeah.
I love good pop songwriting. I think that's a beautiful American art form.
Yeah.
And so it was usually a rock setting, but sometimes I would do just solo piano things. I never considered myself a folk singer, however.
Oh yeah.
Even though I was inspired by those guys, I didn't write that way. My stuff comes out sounding more like Stephen Sondheim usually.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Now, who inspired you, or what inspired you to get into music?
Just falling in love with it at a very young age.
Yeah.
My dad used to listen to a lot of Ella Fitzgerald. And so I loved not just her voice and those fantastic arrangements, but in particular the album Ella Fitzgerald Sings the Cole Porter Songbook. It was Cole Porter's songwriting that really switched me on to wanting to do that. And then, a series of pop songwriters too.
So basically you got to a point where anything goes. Sorry. I love the puns. I do. So So basically, piano is really all that you play, or a keyboard
I
instrument.
can play guitar. I play the bass. I'm not very good at either of those. I'm a piano player.
Yeah, I hear you. Myself also.
Yeah.
How would you describe your music?
I never know what to call it. When my first album came out, the critic Richard Gere in the Village Voice referred to it as psychedelic cabaret music.
Oh, interesting.
And I've just always gone with that. I've also sometimes called it Broadway Goes to Night School. That's been another term I've used. To me, it's just pop songwriting with interesting lyrics, yeah, and strong, hooky melodies. I love good pop hooks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any musician loves great melody lines
Right.
and hooks, you know, and after you write for a while, you get drawn to that.
Right.
Right? I mean,
Well, that's what people remember when they listen to music.
That's right.
You know, it's like a good rhyme in the lyrics, a good hook in the song. That's what people care. That's the earworm. That's what gets in your head.
Exactly.
You know, the guys and the ladies that write music for television commercials, the jingle writers, they are masters of those hooky earworms.
That's right.
Because they know they want you to wake up in the morning. They want that to be the melody you hear when you're taking a shower, when you're washing the dishes, when you're waiting for the light to turn green. They want that thing. Even if you don't like the song, they know it's going to be in your head.
And there's some that I won't sing that out loud, but like that are only two notes. You know, ba-dum, you know,
but it doesn't
something
matter.
like that, and it gets in everybody's heads. That's a hook, exactly.
Yeah.
So your first album was At Apogee.
At Apogee,
2004 came out.
Yeah.
And then The Crumbling Empire of White People.
Yes.
How did you come up with that title?
That's a line from one of the songs. Most of the songs on that album are, you know, about the condition that America was in during the George Bush administration.
Oh, yes.
It was 2007.
Yes.
I made that album. So a lot of the songs deal with the political reality. And
Yes. Cool.
Yeah.
And Bring Back the Real Don Steele.
Yes.
That's a DJ, right?
Real Don Steele was a DJ on Boss Radio 93 KHJ from the mid '60s to the mid '70s, and then he continued being a DJ, but that was his heyday, really. And I fell in love with radio when I was 9 years old, and he was the main disc jockey, and I wanted to be like the Real Don Steele. So I used that mythology in my head. To create a series of songs about Los Angeles. Bring Back the Real Don Steele is a Los Angeles song cycle. So every song on that record is about LA.
Excellent.
And my experience of LA. And you know, his voice is really the guiding influence. I wanted to be a DJ when I was a little kid. I used to do a radio show every Saturday morning in my bedroom from the time I was 9 to the time I was 13. I set up a little fake studio. Nobody ever is the greatest radio show nobody ever heard. But I did it diligently. And then after that, when I turned 13, it was kind of embarrassing, especially because I was getting into girls and they were like, can you get together on Saturday? And I couldn't exactly say, well, you know, I have to do my radio show in my bedroom. How pathetic and nerdy would that be? So I kind of gave it up and got more into playing music. And then, remarkably, you know, I ended up doing radio. Totally accidentally.
Yes, and we will get into that in a second.
Yeah.
Heaven's Not High. You had a band on there called Double Knot Spy Car.
Here they are. Double Knot
You
Spy
got the
Car
shirt on.
Double Knot Spy Car is one of the best bands in the world. They have been playing in Los Angeles since the 90s. I saw them play at a place called Largo.
Yes.
When it was on Fairfax.
On Fairfax?
Yeah, back before it moved to La Cienega. It used to be on Fairfax Avenue.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, and they were playing a show with my dear friend Stu, who had a band called The Negro Problem in the 90s, and they still exist actually.
Band.
Stu has gone on to write, you know, a Tony Award-winning musical called Passing Strange, but they opened for Stu in The Negro Problem. I think it was 1999, right around there, and I just was completely captivated by them, and I knew, like, I'm going to work with those guys one day. They are going to play on my record. And they're actually in various combinations. They're on all of my albums, but as a band, that album was a psychedelic collaboration, Heaven's Not High. It's probably the musical piece I'm most proud of Although we just did another amazing project together that's going to be coming out in January, setting
2016.
Yeah,
cool.
In January 2016, we are part of a larger group of composers who have set the entire novel Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce to music.
Wow.
And we have the first chapter of the book, so we're the opener. And I'm really proud of that stuff, but it's not out yet.
But you do have Fairfax High School and also The Man I Met Once, which were released as singles in 2015.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Fairfax High School was a double knot spy car, and Man I Met Once is just solo piano.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Now let's talk about radio.
Radio.
Let's finish up with radio.
Yes.
You've been hosting radio shows on KPFK since 1995. Now KPFK is 90.7 FM here in Los Angeles, and it's Pacifica Radio, part of the Pacific Radio Network. And the show from 1995 to 2012, right, was featured the music of the Grateful Dead.
Yeah, it was.
Right?
I inherited that show. It was originally called Thursday Lunch.
Thursday Lunch.
With a guy named Bob Young, and his sidekick was a young guy named Tom Norton, and that started in the 80s, and I was a huge fan of that show. I discovered KPFK in the 70s when I was a teenager, and listening to Roy of Hollywood, Folk Scene.
Yeah.
Those are my two main shows that I loved.
Overnight, right?
Yeah, Roy of Hollywood.
You weren't sleeping at
Midnight
night.
to 6. Well, I shouldn't have been listening. I would fall asleep during the show, but he was playing Alan Watts and Krishnamurti.
How can you?
And you know that stuff was just fantastic.
Stay awake,
Yeah. And in the 80s, my wife started doing the Folio, which was the program guide back in the days when radio stations would spend money actually printing things. Now it's all online, of course. But she was the editor of the Folio, and I used to go with her on Friday nights. She would work with Lucia Chappelle, who was the program director at the time. Who was also the significant other of Bob Young, who was the host of the Grateful Dead show, Thursday Lunch. And I would go with Jill, and then I would step into the studio and hang out with Bob and Tom.
Oh, really? Wow, cool.
And I was a huge Deadhead. Station politics changed. Bob was terminated. They gave his sidekick Tom a show called The Music Never Stops. And then after a few months, this was in '95, Tom left, and the show became mine.
Now, in 2012, you decided to take a break, and you created the show that you're doing right now, which is called Headroom.
Yeah, it was a mutual decision. The Music Never Stops. The Grateful Dead format was getting stale.
Yeah.
I played other things besides the Grateful Dead, but essentially everything revolved around a live Grateful Dead performance, and it was getting kind of stale. The audience was dwindling, to be quite honest. And we both thought it was good to take some time off and reassess. And they said, you know, if you want to come back with a new idea, and I did. I thought it shifted gears to psychedelic rock.
Yeah, cool.
Non-Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
And thus Headroom was born.
Where can people listen to your radio show?
Headroom is available online when it's on live on Sunday nights from 8 to 10 at 90.7 FM. The shows are carried for 2 weeks in the archives at kpfk.org. I have a website. It's just simple mrsmolin.com. That's mrsmolin.com.
Barry, thank you so much for being on the NOWMAN Show. This is Nice Wander, and you've been watching the NOWMAN Show.